Hello and welcome. My name is Allison Dawson and I am the Student Development Specialist, English and Writing Tutor for ECTC's TRIO Student Support Services program. I hope that you all are doing well. Today I will be giving a brief virtual presentation titled Quick Tips Writing Concisely. If when you are writing you struggle with wordiness, you find that your writing can be repetitive, or you struggle with over-exceeding in length, this presentation could prove to be helpful for you. It is my hope that you walk away from today's presentation with a better grasp on the value of writing concisely through recognition of several hindrances or items to look out for in your writing that can prevent you from getting straight to the point. And further, I hope through what you learned today that you will be able to correctly revise those hindrances, those items, and produce successful academic writing. The first of these quick tips and the first hindrance I'm going to mention to you has to do with redundancies. And obviously we want to avoid redundancies in our writing, but redundancies are defined as words or phrases that are repeated in writing. And oftentimes these occurrences are unintentional. However, they act as padding in a sentence, meaning they cover up that important stuff, the subject and verb in our sentences and how they agree. Through your writing processes and through instances like this, I want you to ask yourself, how will this affect my audience? How will the way that I'm wording my writing affect how my audience views the information I'm writing about, and how will they take that in? Because really we want our audience to have complete clarity about what we are trying to say. And so with that being said, here's a list of common redundancies or unneeded words. Now, I'm not going to read all of these out loud to you. However, I want you to kind of understand the point I'm trying to make with these. Like past history, for example. When we think about history, we think about the past, so we wouldn't need to say past history. Or when we think about two different, different items mean that two things are different, so we wouldn't need to say two different. And that's kind of the way that I want you to be thinking about redundancies and look for these in your writing. Let's take a look at a few examples. Example 1 under the incorrect example reads, "The library is now open to the general public." Well, when we think about public, we think about people in general. So we really don't need to say general public, as that will be a redundancy. So the correct and revised example will now read, "The library is now open to the public." One complete, concise idea there. Example 2 under the incorrect reads, "During my interview, I was asked about my previous experience in customer service." Well, we know that the interviewee's experience in customer service would be that of previous experience, so we don't need to say that that would be redundant. So the correct and revised example reads, "During my interview, I was asked about my experience in customer service." And example 3, the incorrect example reads, "The specimen was very small in size." So we have a couple of things in this sentence that are just kind of extra. Very small, we don't need that word very there, and small in size. When we think about something being small, we think about that in size. So we don't need to say that that's redundant. So correct and revised example here will read, "The specimen was quite small." And since we had very there to try and place that emphasis, although it was extra, we use that word quite to place that emphasis. And it just kind of flows better. Again, one complete, concise idea. And so always look for those redundancies, avoid those, and revise as needed. The second item we're going to talk about today as far as writing concisely is active voice versus passive voice. And so passive voice is what we want to avoid. And what passive voice does is it kind of gives the subject in the sentence as it experiences action. So something was done or that type of a thing. And unless passive voice is what's required, you really want to use active voice. Active voice shows the action taken by the subject of a sentence. And active voice is much more concise in wording than passive voice. And you'll see this as we go through these examples. Example 1 under passive voice reads, "Secondary research was done by me to gather information for the project." The way that this sentence is worded makes secondary research the subject rather than the individual. So looking at the active voice under number 1, which reads, "I completed secondary research to gather information for the project," we now have that subject we need. So passive voice can kind of be a hindrance in that sense. So that's one thing to look out for. Let's take a look at another example under number 2. Passive voice, which reads, "The experiment was observed by the students." Again, we don't have the subject we need. The students need to be the subject rather than the experiment. And so under active voice, we have the students observe the experiment. That reads much more clearly and concisely, and we have the right subject there. So only be using passive voice when it's required for your audience. Any other time, use that active voice. It will really make a difference for your audience. The next item we're going to go over talks about merging sentence components. And really, this is something we think about when we're going to revise, less of a hindrance in this case. And this is really helpful if you are going over in that length, if you're over exceeding in length. So a couple of items to think about here. My note under example number 1 reads, in some cases, it's acceptable to merge portions of 2 sentences to produce concise writing. So we would be taking 2 sentences and components of those and kind of morphing them together to make a more concise statement. So let's read through this example. The original example reads, counterfeit dollars aren't typically produced with raised printing. Due to this, the texture of the fake bills differentiates them from genuine paper money. Let's see how we can take these 2 sentences and revise them to make a more complete, concise sentence. And so the revised version reads, due to the absence of raised printing, the texture of counterfeit dollars differs from that of genuine paper money. So that really took a lot of the wording out of there and made it one concise idea. So look for opportunities that you can take to revise this, especially if you are over exceeding in length. Example number 2, under my note there, sometimes it's possible that to have wordy phrases and sentences that can be shortened to one brief expression or one word. And so let's take a look at an instance in this case. So our example reads, the watermark, another characteristic present on genuine dollar bills, is absent on counterfeit money. Pay attention to that yellow portion. Another characteristic present on genuine dollar bills. Well, we know that the watermark is another characteristic. So in essence, that's kind of redundant. So when we revise that, the watermark present on genuine dollar bills is absent on counterfeit money. That reads much more concisely, one concise idea. And that's what we're looking for, because that will provide that clarity for our audience. So again, look for these opportunities to revise and improve. And the last item we're going to talk about today are action verbs. Action verbs recount the action taken by the subject of a sentence. And it's really important that we use action verbs, but it's even more important that we choose to use strong action verbs rather than weak action verbs. Here are a few examples for you. Notice that the arrows are pointing to the strong verbs, away from the weak verbs to the strong verbs. So advance rather than move forward, command rather than tell, deviate rather than change, impart rather than give, obtain rather than get, survey or view rather than see. It's important because those stronger verbs strengthen our writing, and strengthening your writing will help provide that clarity for your audience, and it will also help make that writing concise. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Example number 1 reads, the teacher gave out rewards to students who correctly answered the math problems on the test review. So the action taken here is the teacher gave out rewards. Let's take a look at the revised example. The teacher provided incentives to each student who correctly answered the math problems on the test review. Provided incentives is more concise. It took one word out of there, and it's stronger than gave out rewards. So that's kind of what we're looking for in strengthening. Here's another really good example. Example number 2 reads, the hosts did their best to make sure each guest felt welcomed. Let's jump right down to that revised example, which reads, the hosts cultivated a welcoming environment for their guests. This one really made that sentence more concise. Rather than taking a lot of words to say that they did their best to make sure each guest felt welcome, they cultivated a welcoming environment. That really strengthened up that sentence and made it more concise and clear for our readers. And always take the opportunity to do that in your writing to make sure that your audience has clarity. As we conclude today, if you need any additional guidance, here's some great resources. Purdue OWL has a webpage on conciseness in writing. Be sure to go check that out, some great points there. Also, UNC Writing Center has a YouTube video on writing concisely. Some great information there as well. Be sure to check those out. And as always, if you have any further questions, feel free to contact me. My name, email, phone number, and availability are listed on this slide. I thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope that you have a blessed day.